Hello. Well, it's my great pleasure to be able to talk with Sacha Dench today. Sacha is a biologist, a conservationist, and an adventurer. She's known as the Human Swan for her amazing paramotor journey following the Bewick Swans from the Arctic to Britain. She is undertaking a record-breaking 3,000-mile round Britain climate challenge trip in an electric paramotor. And next year, she's going to be the human Osprey. She's going to be following the route of the Osprey on its journey from Britain all the way down to northwest Africa. So it's my great pleasure to speak with Sacha today. Hello, Sacha.
Hello, Gill. Thank you very much, and for being one of the inspirations behind the Osprey trip. Your book was a spectacular insight into the journey of the Ospreys and how to get people excited about them.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, what I'd love to know is there are many ways of raising awareness of bird conservation and so many different ways, but you've chosen to raise awareness this really specific way by actually flying with the birds. Can you tell us why that was such an important way to do it for you?
Oh, there's a few reasons for that. So if we go back to the expedition with the swans, that started because we had there's lots of different issues for the swans in different countries. And in order to be able to solve those threats to the different birds, we needed to speak to different people of different cultures, different languages, and in different industries. So it was everybody from power companies to farmers to hunters. And the scientists who'd been working on trying to figure out why the birds were declining had been going to all these different audiences with a story about how they were part of a problem, how they were a threat to the birds, how they were responsible for lots of dying. And that was a message that was really not working for people. It wasn't getting people excited enough to want to help. And I realized that the way you needed to get lots of people excited about helping was to, first of all, tell a mind-blowing story of the birds. And for me, that everybody would want to hear. And the most mind-blowing story of the birds was just their migration. You know, the journey from the Russian Arctic to the UK. It was from the land of the reindeer breeders across, and the polar bears across stormy seas. Getting shot at. It was a kind of James Bond story for the bird world. That's the story you needed that would get people's attention to make them go, what's going on? Oh, aren't they incredible animals? I want to help. And so then that was where it started. And then I realized to do that, you needed to bring the journey to life in a really interesting way. So could we put little cameras on birds? And I realized that was never going to get accepted. And then from there, I was trying to figure out whether you could get camera people in different countries to piece it together. But that was a bit boring. That was, again, the view from the ground. And I was flying a paramotor at the time for aerial photography of wetlands and conservation habitats. And I realized that you could fly in a paramotor at the same speed and altitude as birds. And you were exposed to the elements. And you have this very similar threats that you face, like extreme weather, difficult takeoffs and landings, always looking for a safe place to stop and land. That it was actually in a paramotor, it's about as close as you can get to flying like a bird. And so that's where the idea came from, that by flying in a paramotor, you could not only get inside the head of the bird, see the world from their point of view, but you could also, share that with a lot of different people and tell a story that anybody wants to hear. Nobody, when I stop and land in a community, there isn't anybody that doesn't go, what? Where have you come from? Isn't it dangerous? And then eventually, when they can see that I care so much about it, they generally start asking how they can help.
I think that's extraordinary. You know, you have this literal bird's eye view and feeling about it. And when you sort of said trying to find a safe place to land, people often don't think about those things, but actually that's what a bird's looking for: where to land, where to feed, where to be safe. And you must have been looking at cloud formations and thinking, oh my goodness, there's a storm coming over there, I've got to get lower. Or I just think that's incredible. And you've had this journey from the Arctic to Britain, and now you're planning the Osprey's journey from Britain down to Africa. What new challenges do you foresee that you might not have experienced in your other journeys? What are you sort of thinking of facing?
Well, in terms of flying, they fly in quite different ways. So the Bewick Swan and the Osprey, whilst they both rely on wetland areas of some kind. So the osprey is to fish and the swans to kind of feed on roots and things and find places to roost. They're following journeys that are along routes, connections of wetlands basically, but they do it in a very different way. So the swans are flying nearly always along flatlands, and they're not looking for thermals. They flap the whole way. They don't cruise at all. So with the swans, we were flying in, across vast flatlands and some fairly difficult terrain, like vast forests where there wasn't very many landing sites. The osprey, however, does a migration that covers a very different sort of landscape. So down through Europe, even central Spain is quite hot, but then across the Sahara Desert, there's some big stretches of water there, and then down into Africa. So along that journey, I'm expecting, and they're also making use of thermals. So they will find warm air rising, thermal in that to get altitude, and then cruise again. And whilst an osprey is incredibly nimble, birds are built for this. They can handle really strong thermals. And just so you can get a bit of an understanding of how a thermal works, you can get kind of gentle, slow areas of hot air where the air is rising in a nice, big, gentle lift, which is nice. But everywhere where there's air rising, on the edge of that air rising, the air is falling down because you need to have a reverse reaction to all of this. So when in areas that are very hot, you could expect those thermals to sometimes be actually really strong. So you've got really strong air drafts going up, and then also cooler air going down the side of that. And when you enter those thermals, whilst you want the lift, entering them, it can be very turbulent. So you can get all sorts of wing collapses there. But there are also going to be areas across the Sahara and even central Spain where the thermals are so big, so wide, that it'll be hard to actually come down in the evening when I actually want to stop and land. It will be hard to find air that's sinking to come in and land. So that will definitely be a big challenge. But also crossing an area of the Sahara that's vast, that's going to throw all sorts of challenges. But I suppose like the journey from the Russian Arctic, I'll definitely be relying on lots of local people to help when you have to land somewhere and need to meet strangers and figure out either where to go, where to find water. It's going to be interesting. And so, Gill, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. It's the 10-year anniversary of Skyhawk. What was it that inspired you to write that?
I think there were two reasons why I was really inspired to write about the osprey specifically. One is that the osprey is just a symbol of conservation success. 100 years ago, there were no ospreys in Britain at all. The Victorians had wiped them out. They'd shot them, they'd taken the eggs, they'd gone. And then in the 1950s, one pair returned. And through the conservation efforts of individuals, organisations and landowners, we've gone from one pair to over 400 breeding pairs of ospreys. It's just fantastic news. And near me in Poole Harbour, there are now ospreys being reintroduced there. It's such a success. But I think the other reason why I wanted to write this story was to show the connection that birds can have between people across thousands of miles. So I wanted to set part of the story in a rural village in Scotland and show how a satellite tagged osprey could connect those children there with a village thousands of miles away in the Gambia, and how that bird could connect these people and also show a benefit for both communities. And I know this is something which is so significant in the journeys that you've been undertaking. And I wondered if you could share with us perhaps some of the specific ways that you've seen migratory birds help bring people together so that there's the benefit for people and the environment too.
Well, I think the connections between people are the really critical thing. With the swan story, for example, when I flew with the swans, their population had been declining every year for about 25 years. And researchers felt they'd been doing lots of things, but the challenge with migratory species that any country, or specifically when there's different issues in different countries, any country can say, well, there's no point us doing our bit. because nobody else is going to, or unless everybody does. And that was a real problem. That if nobody will do anything because they don't think anyone else is doing anything, then nobody will ever do anything, and we'll be stuck in this spiral. That was a key part for me, was getting lots of people along a flyway, realizing that different people were all doing something right now. And I learned something really interesting on the journey, which was that whilst we got people's attention by the story of this crazy lady trying to be a bird, we could get people's eyes opened, their imaginations going, by telling stories of what it's like to be flying with the birds, what the world is like from their point of view, even some of the science. They got their imaginations going. But the only thing that really made people start to put their hands up and say, well, we could do something, was when I told stories about other people doing something. So the Nanettes asked me, how do you know that the bird numbers are declining? And when I explained how volunteers across Europe go out and do mass counts on weekends to try and figure out that, they were kind of blown away that people would go to that sort of effort. And at that point they said, well, why has nobody ever asked us to help? And I was like, okay, this is the right place to be going. And similarly, when I told stories of the Nanette saying, look, we have to shoot some birds, but we didn't know those birds were actually declining. Now that we do know, we can change. We want to be involved in it. Some of us have got internet coverage, so can we get access to data, etc. They wanted to have some sort of involvement. And then when I told people fish farmers in Lithuania that the Nanettes, the people who have got very little, they're nomads up in the Arctic, they're offering to help. The fish farmers in Lithuania said, well, if we didn't realize that the ponds that we're using for fish farmers used to be the primary bird habitats, and that they don't no longer have a place to roost. We normally drain the ponds at that time of year when they're coming through, but we don't have to drain them that early. We could leave the water there longer. So I just found that people's stories, human stories of other people doing something, were really what motivated lots of others to help. So yeah, I think that the human connection is 100%, without any question, more important than the science and the data. You need that to realize there's a real problem, but in terms of fixing it, it's all about stories and human connection. And yeah, for the first time in the last 25 years, the last swan count showed that the birds had stopped declining, and the numbers might even be on the rise again. So yeah, it's all about human connection, Gill.
Human connection is absolutely vital, isn't it?
And Gill, obviously inspiring kids, inspiring the next generation is critical for conservation as well. Why do you choose to do that through writing books?
I think, as you so succinctly said, actually, it's connecting people is so important. And when you write a story, you are connecting people's emotions, often with the science. You're taking children on an adventure. You're sort of saying, take my hand and follow me through this story. And when children, through a story, are allowed empathy, you can feel what other people are feeling, you can feel that anger, you can feel the hope that's often there through the story. And stories raise awareness, and they also empower us to make a difference. And empowerment is so important for young people and for all of us. And I know, especially with your recent climate challenge, flying around Britain, record breaking, that's about empowering people on that journey. So Sacha, you're undertaking this amazing double record breaking 3,000-mile round Britain climate challenge trip in your electric paramotor. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that and why you're doing it?
Yeah, well, I saw that the last expedition worked really well for the Swans in bringing people together, and realised that this year, when the UK is hosting the biggest climate change conference the world has ever seen, and at a really critical time, that the same tool is really what we need in this country for rallying people to take action on climate change. So yeah, I decided to first of all show that I was prepared to do something that might be a bit difficult, try and decarbonize my method of flight. and try this electric paramotor that nobody's ever used for a long journey. They've been used for like short flights to see how far you could go. And I'm now putting it in expedition conditions, trying it across the Lake District, across big stretches of water. And it's not been easy, but I think it's important to show that I'm prepared to put a bit of skin in the game. And because we're asking lots of people to change the way they do business, asking farmers to change the way that they farm. And so that's been a really interesting part of it. But the second interesting bit is to speak to lots of different people who've got solutions to climate change, because if you look at it overall, there are enough solutions in terms of technology, different ways of doing things that will add up to us getting to net zero. It can be done. The question is just motivating enough people to do that. So that's what this expedition has been about. I can only do short flights in the electric paramotor, 35 minutes instead of 3.5 hours. But that means that I just have to stop and land and talk to a lot of different people. And the journey's already taken a lot longer than I'd hoped. But it's certainly inspiring me. And I hope that in sharing that story with lots of other people, we've got a lot more followers as well.
Oh, well, of course, the journey that I'm most excited about is your next journey, which is about, one of my all-time favourite birds, the osprey. You're going to be the human osprey. You're going to be following it on this journey from Britain on its migratory route. Can you tell, I'm sure there are so many people out there who want to follow your journey. How can we be part of that? How can we follow your journey?
Well, the easiest ways will be through social media. So we've got various different social media channels for Conservation Without Borders. We will be producing regular videos for YouTube about the expedition. We'll be encouraging people to get involved, write comments, ask questions of the different people we're meeting, because whilst it's about following the osprey, we're also really stopping and speaking to all different communities along the way. And when you think about it, that will be everyone from, potentially even nomadic communities in the Sahara. It could be government ministers in Ghana. It could be fishermen off Sierra Leone. It'll be all sorts of different people we'll be speaking to. So we'll be offering all sorts of ways there. We'll also have an education program as well. So we will want to be doing live broadcasts to schools where they can engage and ask questions.
That is going to be absolutely fantastic. I can't wait. But I have to wait until autumn 2022. But it's been my huge pleasure. It really has, Sacha, to be able to speak with you today and to take time out of your fantastic Round Britain Climate Challenge. So thank you so much for joining us. And I cannot wait to follow your journey.
And Gill, yes, it's been very nice to speak to you as well. And also thank you again for all the incredible books you write. I've told lots of people to read Skyhawk. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And it's definitely been an inspiration to me. So, thank you for all you've done.
Thank you.